As dusk approaches, this man begins a strange nightly ritual. He douses the perimeter of his doorway with alcohol, and upon returning inside, his first priority is to thoroughly scrub his dog clean. The moment the sun begins to dip below the horizon, he doesn't waste a single second. He quickly secures heavy steel shutters over every window and door, locking his entire home down completely. Inside, he refuses to light a single lamp, yet his heart still pounds with dread. Consumed by a profound sense of vulnerability, he grips his rifle tightly, huddled in the corner of the bathtub with his dog, clinging to this tiny, isolated space as his only sanctuary. The question remains, why is he so terrified, and why does he maintain such extreme security? In truth, his desperate struggle is all about surviving the absolute horror that awakens the moment the night falls. As the night deepens, the world outside transforms into a nightmare. It is no longer the Earth we once knew, but a dark kingdom ruled by bloodthirsty, savage predators. Grotesque, human-like monsters prowl the ruins, a terrifying consequence of the apocalypse that began 3 years ago when a lethal virus pushed humanity to the brink of extinction. That pandemic claimed 90% of the global population, but for those who survived, their fate was far worse than death. Infected by the virus, they mutated into creatures that cannot withstand sunlight, emerging only in the shadows of the night to hunt. Yet, amidst this crumbling wasteland, one man stands apart: Will. Will's immune system, specifically his antibodies, is so remarkably effective that the virus has been unable to defeat him. Now he races through the deserted, echoing streets of New York City in his sports car, accompanied only by his loyal dog. Driven by the primal need to survive, he hunts a deer. In this desolate world, hunting is the only way to secure a meal. Just as the deer comes within his reach and he prepares to pull the trigger, a lioness suddenly lunges at it from out of nowhere. Will instinctively raises his rifle to take the shot, but he immediately freezes when he notices a lion and their cub nearby. Seeing this raw, human-like moment in the wild instantly transports him back to the past. Images of his own shattered family, his parents, and the loved ones he lost to the pandemic flood his mind. The agonizing pain of that loss and the haunting memories of a life left behind leave him deeply melancholy. In the end, he decides against pulling the trigger, realizing how vital it is to preserve the balance of nature in this devastated world. Before heading out in search of other survivors, he checks on his secret underground laboratory, where he has been testing his self-developed antidote on several virus-infected rats. He waits anxiously, desperate to see if his treatment can return them to a normal state. Initially, seeing no positive changes, he feels a wave of disappointment. Will is a brilliant scientist working tirelessly to save humanity from this lethal virus by developing a specialized gene therapy. Just as he starts to believe that today will be another day of failure, he witnesses something truly inconceivable. An infected rat that was previously extremely aggressive has finally calmed down. The physical transformation in that rat makes it clear that Will's antidote has begun to work. It is gradually recovering. If this formula proves successful, it might finally be possible to transform those cursed monsters back into living, breathing humans. Regardless, as soon as daylight breaks, Will slings his rifle over his shoulder and heads out toward an unknown destination. Every day, like clockwork, he visits a video library to trade in old DVDs for new ones. However, the most bizarre sight is watching him chat effortlessly with the inanimate plastic mannequins placed throughout the store. He speaks to them as if they were his oldest, closest friends. It is hard to imagine how lonely a man must be to share his heart with lifeless objects, unless you witness Will's reality. Essentially, to maintain his sanity and escape the unbearable weight of his solitude, he has constructed an entire imaginary world around himself. Every day, Will meticulously marks the routes he takes across the city on his map. Scavenging for the necessities to survive in this deserted urban wasteland has become his primary mission. However, beyond that, he carries out one task with unwavering dedication. Exactly at noon, he heads to the harbor to broadcast a continuous message over the radio, holding on to the hope that someone else, somewhere in the world, might still be alive. Yet, after 3 grueling years, he has never received a single response. To cope with those agonizing moments of loneliness, he sometimes stands atop a wing of a massive warplane, firing golf balls out toward the vast ocean. This is how he spends his days, trapped in a cycle of monotony and silence. But suddenly, one day, his calm dog starts barking uncontrollably. In the distance, Will spots something strange, a blurred figure moving behind the desolate, ruined skyline of the city. He immediately raises his rifle and peers to the scope, only to realize it is just a deer. Without wasting a single second, he and his dog give chase. The deer, panicked and running aimlessly, darts into a dark room within an abandoned building. Will's loyal dog, perhaps driven by the sheer desperation of hunger, loses all sense of caution and follows the deer into the pitch-black hallway. Will screams for him to stop, but by then his dog has vanished into the darkness. Will's heart races with terror, for he knows all too well what horrific dangers lurk inside these dark buildings, even during the daylight hours. Yet he cannot let his only lifelong companion die like this. There is no other way to save him but to go inside. With his heart pounding in his chest and filled with dread, Will finally steps into the building, where nothing but thick, suffocating darkness awaits him on all sides. As he climbed to the upper floor, frantically searching for his dog, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the building. A dark foreboding washed over him. Still, gathering every ounce of courage he had left, he pushed forward. Following a trail of fresh blood leading up the stairs, he came a corner and came face to face with the severed head of a beast. But to his relief, as he stepped closer, he realized it was just a deer or a moose that had been freshly killed. Yet the look of sheer terror frozen in the dead animal's eyes revealed how much agony it had endured before dying. Witnessing this, Will raised his gun and began scanning his surroundings with extreme caution. That was when he was met with a hellish sight. A pack of bloodthirsty monsters was positioned less than 5 meters away from him. Mustering all his courage for the sake of his dog, Will was forced to push even deeper into the building. Finally, he found his German Shepherd cowering under a table, looking absolutely traumatized. Just as he moved forward to call out to his dog, Will suddenly sensed that something was terribly wrong behind him. As he turned around, a bone-chilling sight unfolded before his eyes. Without a moment's hesitation, Will grabbed his dog and began running toward the exit like a madman. At one point, the bloodthirsty monsters were inches away from catching him, but luckily, Will managed to leap out through a window just in time. The moment sunlight hit one of the creatures, it collapsed to the ground in agony. Although this experience left Will deeply shaken, it also provided him with the perfect opportunity. He decided to set a trap outside to test his self-developed antidote on the zombies. He drew a vial of blood from his own body and prepared to. Will placed the vial of blood at the building's entrance and retreated to a hidden spot nearby, waiting in ambush. His plan didn't take long to succeed. Within just 2.5 minutes, a zombie took the bait. As soon as the trap was triggered, the creature was dragged helplessly out into the blinding daylight. But at that exact moment, a hideous, snarling male zombie emerged from the shadows of the building with a deafening, furious roar. The sheer ferocity in his eyes made it seem as if he would tear Will apart in an instant. Will himself couldn't fathom why this monster was so incredibly enraged. Regardless, upon returning home, he became consumed with testing his new antidote on the captured zombie. He had no idea who this female zombie really was, or why that other monster had roared in such a way on her behalf. Little did Will know, he had inadvertently captured the mate of the zombie king. This single action ignited a final, desperate war between the zombies and the last surviving human in this desolate city. His shock reached its peak, however, when he noticed a mannequin's head on the side of the road suddenly twitch. The most terrifying part was the mystery of it all. That specific mannequin was supposed to be at the entrance of the video library, and no one could explain how it had ended up miles away on this deserted street. Panic-stricken, Will immediately leveled his gun at the mannequin. His mind raced, wondering if some other living human or a mysterious force was playing a deadly game with him. Will initially thought that perhaps another survivor had placed the mannequin there to make contact, but he couldn't see a single sign of human life anywhere. In reality, this was a calculated trap set by the Zombie King as cold-blooded revenge for Will taking his mate to the laboratory. As Will approached the mannequin out of curiosity and bent down to inspect a puddle on the ground, the Zombie King's death trap was triggered. In the blink of an eye, Will's leg was snared, and he was jerked upward, left hanging upside down in the air. Due to the severe blow to his head, he lost consciousness instantly. When he finally came to, he realized the sun was just about to set. Waking up to the blaring sound of his alarm clock, he immediately grasped that a mortal danger was staring him in the face. Because, as the final traces of sunlight vanished, those nightmarish monsters began to emerge from every shadow. Desperate to survive, Will frantically pulled a sharp knife from his belt and tried to cut the rope binding his leg. But as he hit the ground, a horrific accident occurred. The knife slipped and plunged directly into his thigh. The situation became critical as the last light of twilight faded into nothingness. At that very moment, Will received an ominous sign. A blood-curdling shriek echoed from the dark building ahead. In the blink of an eye, the Zombie King appeared and unleashed 3 terrifying infected hunter dogs on him. Due to the remaining faint light, the zombie dogs could not reach him initially, but as total darkness took over a few minutes later, the starving predators lunged at Will with savage fury. At this crossroads of life and death, our protagonist, severely wounded and battered, found his only hope in his loyal German shepherd, his shadow and constant companion in this ruined world. Knowing this dog was his only reason to keep living, Will was paralyzed by the fear of losing his beloved friend. Seeing his pistol lying inside the car, he began dragging his broken body toward it, desperate to reach his only line of defense, only to collapse to the ground again. At that precise moment, the vicious creatures pounced on him. Will managed to fend off the first attack with a few gunshots, but immediately after, a second hunter dog charged with lightning speed. Just as the bloodthirsty beast's sharp teeth were about to rip Will's jaw apart, his loyal German shepherd arrived like a guardian angel to shield him, throwing itself into the fight to save his master's life. The most devastating event occurred when Will realized that during the fight, another infected dog had bitten his beloved German shepherd. His heart shattered, for he knew that the antibody for this virus existed only in his own body, not in his helpless companions. Upon returning home, Will frantically prepared an antiviral injection and pushed it into the dog's system. He cradled his dear friend in his arms, praying silently for a recovery. With a heart full of hope and a faint smile, he tried to console himself, believing his partner would return to normal. But then, his blood ran cold when he saw the fur beginning to fall off the dog's body. The telltale signs of the lethal virus began to show on the dog's face as well. Will's heart broke into a million pieces in an instant. The cruel reality forced him to make a decision so difficult he had never dared to imagine it. Against his will, Will used his own shaking hands to put his beloved companion out of his misery, the same creature who had stayed by his side like a shadow through every lonely dark night. Having lost his dearest friend, Will was completely shattered mentally. However, in this moment of deep grief, a strange suspicion crossed Will's mind. He knew that when humans are infected by the virus and turn into zombies, they possess no intellect or judgment. Yet the question of how these zombies could orchestrate such perfect, calculated traps remains a massive mystery to him. Will couldn't comprehend how the zombies had become so intelligent, but when he looked at the passenger seat and realized Sam, his dog, was gone, the dam of his patience and grief finally broke. That very night, driven by a blind rage for revenge, he drove his car straight toward the harbor and launched a full-scale surprise attack on the zombies without a second thought. Shielded by his car, the zombies couldn't reach him at first, but their numbers were overwhelming. Eventually, the horde of zombies completely swarmed the vehicle and began smashing the windows. Just then, several zombies climbed up a streetlight and brought it crashing down directly onto the car. In an instant, Will found himself trapped within the wreckage of his own vehicle. Will saw the horde of frenzied zombies charging toward him and fought with everything he had to escape the wreckage. But before he could break free, more zombies swarmed the area, and their leader signaled for a final lethal assault. Before Will could regain his composure, a massive blow sent his car flipping onto the side of the road, and the bloodthirsty monster stood directly before him. At that moment, Will was as helpless as a trapped deer. Death was closing in on him with every passing second. In that dire crisis, a sudden, blinding flash of light appeared, making it seem as if someone was approaching him. But, overcome by sheer terror and physical agony, he couldn't hold on any longer and slipped into unconsciousness. When Will finally opened his eyes, he discovered himself in his own bed. He was stunned to see that the deep wound on his leg had been carefully bandaged. Standing before him were a woman and a young child. For the first time in 3 long years, Will was looking at the faces of other living human beings. Having been alone for so many days, he had almost forgotten how to talk to other people. The woman introduced herself as Anna. She told Will that she had heard his broadcast on the radio. She had traveled to New York with the child and had waited for him all day, but he never arrived. Anna mentioned that she was now planning to head toward Vermont, as there is supposedly a safe sanctuary established there for the survivors. Instead of feeling relieved by Anna's words, Will became uncontrollably furious. In a harsh voice, he told her that there was no such thing as a safe place left on Earth. The entire country had been reduced to a wasteland. When Anna tried to argue with him, Will lost his temper and shouted at her. Having believed himself to be the only human left alive for so long, he was suffering under an immense psychological burden. Shrouded in despair, Will had become entirely dependent on science and logic. Finding the cure for the virus had become his sole purpose and obsession. All his hopes were confined within the 4 walls of his lab. However, the news Anna brought suddenly shattered his long-held beliefs and worldview in a single instant. Anna's words forced Will to realize that he was not alone in this world. There were others still alive. This meant that the loneliness Will had endured for so long and his relentless hard work might not have been in vain. After all, a living, breathing human being was standing right in front of him. Sitting in his room, Will fought a long internal battle with his own thoughts. Finally, he accepted the harsh reality and stepped out of his room. Anna tried to persuade Will to leave with them to the quarantine zone, but Will flatly refused. He insisted that he would not leave his sanctuary. Anna then walked into Will's lab, and Anna couldn't believe her eyes as she stared at the female zombie preserved on ice. She asked Will in disbelief if he could truly restore this monster to its former self. Anna's gaze then drifted to the walls, covered with hundreds of photos of zombies. Driven by his obsession to create an antidote, Will had been using them all as lab subjects. As the last light of the sun faded away, Will became alert and quickly locked every window and door of the house. Anna pleaded with him once more to come with them to the safe haven, but before Will could respond, the silence outside was shattered by a deafening roar and immense commotion. When Will looked outside through a small gap in the window, his blood ran cold. He saw a massive army of zombies descending upon his house like a plague of locusts. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Will had always taken extreme precautions to mask his scent, yet it was incomprehensible how these monsters had tracked his secret lair. The zombies were charging toward them, crazed like starving hyenas. When Will interrogated Anna, a terrifying truth emerged. Yesterday, when Anna rescued Will and brought him home, she hadn't taken any precautions in her haste. She had come straight to the lair without masking her scent the way Will did. However, there was no time left now to cast blame on each other. Will immediately switched on all the high-voltage lights surrounding the perimeter. But surprisingly, the zombies, who typically feared the light, displayed an unbelievable level of intelligence this time. They strategically destroyed the streetlights one by one, using the darkness to advance toward Will. Seeing the situation spiraling out of control, a terrified Will quickly activated his secondary security system, detonating all the surrounding mines and bombs simultaneously. As the smoke cleared, Will saw that the front line of zombies had been nearly wiped out. Gasping for air, he began calling for Anna, but there was no response from the other side. As Will went to the upper floor to search for Anna, a horrific zombie suddenly ambushed him. The monster grabbed him like a wild beast and slammed him violently onto a table. A helpless Will was at the mercy of the zombie's cruelty. At one point, when the zombie assumed Will might be dead, it didn't realize that Will was actually waiting for a chance to counterattack. Seizing the perfect moment, Will grabbed a screwdriver from the side and struck the zombie with all his might. Unfortunately, the strike caused little damage to the creature. Instead, it became enraged, grabbed Will, and threw him to the floor. The zombie king then stared directly at Will and let out a deafening roar of pure fury. Without wasting a moment, Will quickly grabbed a rifle from nearby, but the zombie retreated as if it understood perfectly how lethal human-made weapons could be. Will tried to lock his aim on the target, but the cunning zombie ducked behind a wall to hide. Desperate, Will pulled the trigger, aiming directly at a gas cylinder. A massive explosion sent the zombie flying outward. Astonishingly, even after such a powerful blast, the creature was barely injured. With lightning speed, it climbed up the stairs and vanished from sight. When Will chased after it, he saw the zombie leap out of a window and escape into the night. Will frantically began searching for the woman and the child inside the house. His blood ran cold as he entered a room and realized another zombie was lying in wait. Anna and the child were cowering in terror under a cabinet. Will signaled for them to remain perfectly silent. He carefully raised his pistol, preparing to eliminate the creature, but the zombies suddenly sensed their presence. To save the lives of Anna and the child, Will risked his own life, lunging into the room and firing a barrage of bullets at the monster. However, the danger was far from over. A deafening roar echoed from outside. When Will opened the door, he found the zombie king himself standing there, letting out a roar directly at him. It became clear that the zombies would not let him escape today.
In truth, the zombie king hadn't left. He had only retreated temporarily to return with reinforcements. The most terrifying aspect was that this attack wasn't just mindless destruction, it was completely calculated and strategic. Seeing the zombie leader outside the window, Will's anxiety skyrocketed. He realized the zombies were no longer just bloodthirsty beasts, but were now operating with human-level intelligence. Sensing the imminent danger, the three of them quickly fled to the underground hideout, the bunker. Will bolted the main door shut, and Anna hid in a corner of the lab with the child. Just then, Anna witnessed a miraculous sight inside the lab that she could never have imagined. She immediately shouted for Will to come and see. Inside the lab, Anna saw that the vaccine Will had created was finally beginning to work. The zombie king's mate was slowly transforming back into a human. But at that very moment of joy, the zombie army swarmed the lab. Will rushed to lock the reinforced glass door. He wanted to make the zombies understand that he now had the medicine to turn them all back into normal humans. However, in the eyes of the zombies, Will was nothing more than a terrifying monster. Not only had he been capturing their kind for cruel experiments, but he had now also kidnapped the zombie king's mate. To the zombies, Will's scientific efforts were the ultimate form of torture. As a result, the massive horde of zombies was fuming with rage. As the zombie king hammered against the reinforced glass, cracks began to spiderweb across the surface. At this life or death moment, Will realized a profound truth. As he looked around in desperation, his gaze fell upon Anna's neck. There was a butterfly tattoo. The moment he saw the butterfly, everything became crystal clear. He realized this was perhaps a sign from above. Without wasting a single second, he grabbed a container and extracted the serum from the zombie king's mate. Her blood had transformed into a potent vaccine capable of producing the antibodies necessary to fight the virus in the human body. Will had finally found the miraculous cure that could save the world from this devastation. After collecting the serum, he didn't waste a moment. He sent Anna and the child into the secret underground tunnel. He placed the serum in Anna's hands and sealed the tunnel door forever. At that exact moment, the zombie king shattered the glass wall with immense force and lunged inside. Will knew there was no escape, but he had fulfilled his mission to save humanity. With a calm hand, he pulled the pin on a grenade and charged straight towards the massive pack of zombies. Through a deafening explosion, Will sacrificed his own life to become an immortal legend. And that is how this extraordinary movie comes to an end. How did you feel about Will's sacrifice and this movie? Do let us know in the comments. If you liked this video, be sure to share it with your friends, give it a like, and if you are new to our channel, subscribe and stay with us. That is all for today. We'll see you in the next video.